Welcome back to another live stream. So today we're going to be doing another WiiHDMI installation. If you were here yesterday, you will know that we ran into some technical issues. We did a WiiHDMI installation on an RVL-CPU-20, and that's one of the models that this mod wasn't explicitly designed for. And we ran into some technical issues with the installation, which happens to have been the first time I ever actually installed on a CPU-01. At least this particular version of the mod. I've installed other versions before I implemented the flex cable and all that sort of stuff. But this is that was the first one that I installed of the current generation of the mod. So we ran into technical issues with the installation, and we also ran into technical issues with my stream capture setup, which kind of took us on a wild goose chase, where there weren't actually problems that we thought were problems and all sorts of stuff. So I wasn't happy with that video, or with that stream that we did yesterday. So I am back to stream another installation, this time into an RVL-CPU-20. This is another customer provided console. So I want to do another stream just showing how to do the installation. The CPU-20 is the same installation process as the CPU-01, so it'll be equally as informative, but this time I've sorted out the capture issues with my game capture setup. At least hopefully I have. And if we end up having problems with the game capture, at least it'll be easier to pinpoint what the problem is, and we won't get thrown off thinking that there's a problem with the Wii when there's not actually. So we're going to go ahead and start this installation procedure, and I'm going to detail the new installation process that I've come up with since what we experienced yesterday. Okay, let's get started with the disassembly. Let's see. Tweezers. So I'm following the same basic procedure that I did yesterday as far as the disassembly is concerned. That hasn't changed. So we try to keep all of the screws organized in these little containers, these little segmented containers, so I can keep track of which screws come from which layer of the Wii. Okay. This installation is going to be a little bit simpler too, because the we're just going to be installing it into the original, back into the original shell. So the last one, the customer sent along a reproduction shell for the installation, and it added some complexity certainly to the installation process. So we are going to be avoiding a little bit of that. Okay. All right, so we're gonna remove the metal shell. From the top here. And then we've got 4 screws to remove for the optical drive. Okay, and then under the optical drive there's a ribbon cable and a wiring harness. And what you want to do is you want to work this wiring harness out of the little plastic container. It's like there's like a little plastic piece that this slides into, and you just want to work that out of there. Then you can simply unplug the wiring harness and flip up the ribbon cable connector and remove the ribbon. We'll set the optical drive back here. All right, now we've got about a 1.5 million screws to remove, so we'll go ahead and get started on that. And we got our Wi-Fi antennas loosened up here. And then this little nut here is for the battery door. So we want to make sure we don't lose that. That's an easy one to lose. In all the Wii HDMIs that I've installed, throughout the whole testing process and development of the mod, leaving that nut out is the most common thing that I repeatedly did. You know, there's something funny about the Wii. Nintendo, so with the screws that they use in here, so you notice that they're like the long screws that are inside of here. Some of them are silver, some of them are black. And this is one of those weird things with the Wii where, unlike other Nintendo consoles, where like the Super Nintendo, for example, it has multiple different screws that are different colors. And the reason for that is because they have different coatings on them, and that's because they interact with different things. I think it was different coatings were used for screws that connected only into plastic versus screws that mounted into like metal, to the metal shell, or EMI shell. Shield. That's what I'm looking for. The word that I'm looking for is shield. So different screws were used for places where the screw interacted with metal versus interacting with plastic or the circuit board. But on the Wii, it's like these long screws are either black or silver, and it seems like it's totally random. I've opened up a bunch of different Wiis, and it seems like they just used whichever color they felt like, and it doesn't seem to have any actual purpose that I can tell, because sometimes black screws are going into plastic like they are in here. Sometimes black screws are going directly into metal like the heatsink screws and stuff like that. Sometimes the silver screws are going into plastic. It's totally random, and I don't know what the different color screws are actually meant to signify here. I just think that's an oddity with the Wii. I think the N64 also has specific different screws with different coatings for different places they interact, like the power. Well, the screws are different lengths too on the N64, so that's another kind of unrelated factor. But anyway, it seems to me that the type of screw coating material seems to be deliberate in other Nintendo consoles, and here it just seems random. Although there always does seem to be some either silver and white screws, a mix of silver and white screws. So I don't really know what that's about. All right, yeah, and the last Wii that I took apart, the heatsink screws were black. Here they're silver. So we're gonna remove the heatsink screws in a diagonal pattern in the hope that we don't put very much pressure one way or another on the heatsink. And then we'll remove the Wi-Fi card as well. Actually, this one seems to be held down with adhesive. Most of the time the Wi-Fi cards are just loose. So we're gonna leave it. If it's held on with some sort of adhesive, I don't want to remove it. Okay, and then that's the back plate there. And set that back here. Okay, so the way we did this last time, yesterday, the way I installed this is I actually took the flex cable and attached it to the HDMI board before I installed it here. When I did that, I don't know if it was the reason that this happened, but when I did that, we ended up with a couple of the electrical connections, the pads here on the flex cable, ending up damaged. They weren't visually damaged, but they were no longer conducting electricity. There was no signal coming through them. And I think what ended up happening is that when I installed the flex onto the HDMI board and then had to wiggle it down into place to be able to solder it onto the AVE RVL chip, I think all the flexing back and forth that I did on the actual flex cable may have damaged the traces inside of it. So we ended up having to replace the flex cable, and so that got me thinking about a different way to do this installation procedure that hopefully will avoid that issue entirely. So what we're going to do today is, instead of installing the flex cable onto the HDMI mod, then installing that onto the board, we're going to instead install the flex cable onto the board first, and then we're going to solder it onto the HDMI mod. This is a little bit less convenient to do, but I think this will be more, I think this will be less stressful on the actual flex cable to do it this way. So we're going to do that, and that should hopefully be successful. All right, so let's get you fully zoomed in here. So this is our area of interest. All right, so I'm gonna flip this around here. Try to get this kind of lined up for us. Okay, so I've got my soldering iron. I'm using a micro pencil tip for this just to tack this down. And then I will be switching to my knife tip to actually finish off the soldering of all these leads. So we want to get this lined up nicely. Oop, come on, camera. I'm gonna get this nicely lined up to where everything pretty much looks good. Then we're just gonna drop a little flux here. Take this pre-tinned soldering iron tip, and we're just going to try to tack this down. There we go. That's tacked down. That's not going anywhere. All right, then we're gonna switch over to the main portion here where most of the leads are. And we're going to hold down. Oh, I completely forgot. There's a capacitor I have to remove. I'm crazy. Okay, let's get this flex cable out of here. C43 needs to be removed. It's in the way. So we're gonna take the knife tip. We're gonna take the knife tip and pull C43 off. C43 is part of the flex cable, so it's not needed. Once it's been desoldered here. Okay. Let's do this again. Okay, that's good. That's good enough for what we're doing right now. All right, so we're gonna go in here. A little bit of solder added to the tip. Press this down and then tack both sides down, and then we'll go ahead and tack down the audio as well. All right. So that's all nice and ugly looking. Let's get back in here with the knife tip and actually clean all of this up. So we're going to add a little bit more solder, clean the tip of our knife tip here, because there should be plenty of solder already on the board. In fact, there's probably too much solder on the board. So part of what we're doing is actually removing some of that excess solder using the tip, the surface area of the knife tip. And that looks good. Let's do the same thing over here on the side. Okay. And then last is audio. Okay, now that that's soldered in place, we got to get the flex connected to the HDMI board. And this is the tricky thing about this installation, is that this flex was not, well, none of this mod was designed to go on this particular motherboard revision of the Wii. So in order to make it work, what we have to do is we have to actually kind of finagle things in here that where they're not really meant to be. So things had to be bent around and stuff. So we're going to be soldering this board like this, but we need to prop up the flex a little bit so that it successfully can be soldered. So what I'm going to do in order to prop the flex up a little bit is I'm going to add in an adhesive strip right underneath the edge of the flex. This is basically just slightly different than what I did last time. I did do an adhesive strip here, but it was just to hold the Wii HDMI mod in place. This time, the theory is that the Wii HDMI mod, or that the adhesive is going to help hold the flex cable up without putting too much strain on it to cause any kind of physical damage to it while I solder it. Okay, and then we're going to take a tiny little square that I cut here. We're going to poke it up underneath this end here. And that should make this flex easier to solder to. And then this board is just going to lay right on top of there. Like that. Now, we're not going to do that yet, though, because we actually have to remove the adhesive from this flex, or from this tape. There's a little capacitor, or not a little capacitor, there's a big capacitor right here that's so tall that it interferes with the board, so we have to kind of hollow that out. And then we're going to actually put another flex, or another piece of adhesive on top of this. That I've already pre-cut. Okay, so that gives the mod a nice flat surface to sit on. Which is exactly what we need. Okay, so now we just need to peel this layer of the adhesive off as well, so that when we finish soldering this, we can just stick the board down and we don't have to flex anything up or down anymore. We do need to clip the IR board portion off of the HDMI mod, so we're going to go ahead and do that real quick. This IR board normally would stay on for any CPU-40, 50, or 60 board, but since this is a -20, we have to clip this IR board off and install it separately. So this board is going to end up right here. So we just need to stick this down. Okay, so the HDMI mod is stuck down. Now we're just going to go in and add solder to each of those pads. Okay, and we do have a little bridge that is formed here. So we're going to come back in with the knife. And clean that up just a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Let's see if I can get it angled up a little bit. So, as you can see, all the pads are connected nicely, and the flex is fully soldered down as well. So we do have a little bridge that I didn't see before on the flex. We'll clear that real quick. Yeah. It was right there. Okay. All right. So that bridge is cleared now. We can move on to installing the IR board. The IR board is pretty simple to install. We just need to remove some of the solder from this ground leg here, because that's going to be an anchor point and we need to make some room. Going to remove some solder from these two anchor points as well. Let's see, solder width. So just gonna suck up some of that solder. All right. Then we come in with the IR board, just drop it into place. It's wobbling. What's causing the wobble? Oh, there's like a little... There was like a little burr of solder. Okay. Oops. There we go. That's nice and flat now, so we're just going to go back in and solder each of these anchor points, and then just go through and solder each of the pads. Weird. That's an interesting... So in the camera, that solder pad, that pad here to the right of this line right here, of this trace here, is it looked weird in the camera, but not in real life. Not actually looking down on it. It looked like it was a cold joint, but it actually, in real life, it was not. Super weird. Alright, so next we are going to do the actual HDMI port, which we will install right here. And we want to try to make sure that it's fairly straight. So we want to kind of use this white line, the white silkscreen line here, to help kind of square it up. We're going to tack down one pad, make sure it's pretty much square, and then we'll tack down the rest. And this one's this portion here is really important that you get everything tacked down, because this USB port serves as an anchor for the entire HDMI port. So it's relying on all of these soldered connections to help secure it and make sure that it doesn't, you know, buckle under the forces of plugging in and unplugging the HDMI cable. Okay. And these little ground pads are basically doing all the heavy lifting. All right. So now we'll go ahead and install the flex cable. And these mods, I use this standard flex cable for all the mods. So even on the older generation Wiis that have this really short run between where the flex gets installed onto the WiiHDMI mod and where it actually ends up connecting up to the console or to the HDMI port, I still have these long cables, so just have to kind of work them into place, which is a bit of a pain. Let's see here. This helps a little bit. There we go. Oh, that was a lot easier. So if you feed it underneath the board first, then into the ribbon cable connector, the flex cable connector, then it's a lot easier. And then you just want to fold it, send it back through the other direction and into this connector. Wow, that was so easy. All right, so next we're going to have to connect the IR board to the HDMI mod. And we're going to use some of this ribbon cable for that. So we got 4 pins that need to be connected. So we just need to strip off some jacket, and then we'll tin this, and then we'll get it all hooked up. And what the IR board does is it provides 3.3 volt power to the HDMI mod, and it also provides the IR receiver for remotes and a little tack switch to control getting into the IR menu. So if you're using a remote to control the menu instead of using a GameCube controller, all of those functions are done using that that IR board. Okay, there's that. And to solder this in, we're going to come in here and pre-tin these pads. And just going to lay this down here and solder it in place. Just got to get it lined up. take the micro tip and just double check all these connections. That one's a little bit dry. This, actually the bottom two are both a little dry. There we go. Okay, those are looking pretty nice. And then we just bring this down here. And basically, these pins need to line up. So you can see the red line here for this ribbon cable. This pin lines up to this pin here. So the ribbon just needs to basically be, you know, manipulated around to line up this pin out. Because normally these would be connected together directly on the same board. But we've removed that connection because we have separated the board into two pieces. And that's just because this mod doesn't really install in the same location. This mod doesn't really install in the same location on a on any non CPU 40, 50, or 60 motherboards. Okay, can you see that? Should be able to see that pretty well. And that actually looks pretty good, but we'll just go over it one more time with the micro tip. There we go. All right. Try to get this so you want to make sure that your wiring clears this hole here, because that's where the CPU that's a standoff in the case for the CPU heatsink to screw into, so you don't want that wire to get in the way. All right, and we got one more wire to solder. It's the pad wire for controlling the menu using a GameCube controller. So that wire goes from this pad up here down to TP27 down here by the controller 1 GameCube controller port. We just use a little bit of 28 gauge stranded wire. Okay, we're just going to tin this wire. All right, got our wire tinned. Put a drop of flux. Then we go down here and make sure that your wire lines up, but also doesn't get in the way of any of these screw holes. And again, we're going to pin this wire. Sorry about that. I use a Camlink 4K for my for capturing the main A cam, and it's been freezing a little bit lately, so I don't know if maybe something's going wrong with the Camlink or something. But anyway, I have to watch out for that. All right, so we're going to TP27 with this wire. All right, that is the completed HDMI mod. So let's go ahead and get this hooked up to the game capture and test it, and then we'll start working on the housing. Now this time, my capture card, I think, is sorted out. I had a bad HDMI. The HDMI soldering was actually bad. It had some broken joints on the HDMI plug. So I went through and had to reflow my capture card. But anyway, so it should be working now. Let's go ahead and switch over to game capture. Okay, and then that's our warning. And we need to sync up a Wii remote. And we need to plug in okay, let's run over to the settings real quick. Turn on progressive scan. There you go. All right, I'm gonna shut it off real quick, and because I forgot to grab a GameCube controller. I don't want to leave it running without everything fully reassembled for heat reasons. Let me go grab a GameCube controller, and then we'll hop into the DC video menu. All right, got us a GameCube controller. And holding down LRXY gets us into the settings. We're gonna go to the output settings, turn on enhanced DVI mode to get us sound. And let's see how sound sounds. Oh no, I can't tell how sound sounds because my monitor that this is also hooked up to is not working. Well, this sucks. Hold on. I'm gonna unplug it from here real quick. And I'm gonna plug it directly into my LCD monitor. Hey, that's sound. Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. All right, cool. Go ahead and get it hooked back up for you guys. All right, sweet. So everything went great. Let's start working on the case. So we'll set the motherboard aside. All right, so for the bottom housing, we have to remove the shield because the mod just doesn't fit in place with the shielding on there. So we just remove it. That's the simplest solution. Okay. So this is a little weird inside. It's stained inside of here. This is not like dirt. This is actually like it's actually like stains on the plastic that are not visible on the outside but are on the inside. That's really interesting. I don't know what causes that. But anyway, so we're not going to worry about that. We're going to worry about what we're doing, what we have to do. So the HDMI port, we're going to start on the top half of the shell. And we're going to use our calipers here. And we're going to use our reference Wii to get our measurements. So on the reference Wii, you can maybe possibly see that we have, oh, hold on. There we go, a little bit better lighting, slightly. All right, so on the reference Wii, you can see that we have the HDMI port cut already. So we're gonna go ahead and measure our key dimensions. Okay, so the HDMI port extends out from the edge of the USB port. We'll just say 11.9. Well, we'll say 11.85. So 11.85 millimeters from the edge of the USB port. So we're going to deliberately mark the plastic there so that we have a line to work off of. And then the vertical depth is approximately 1.5. So we're going to go ahead and mark that as well. And that's 1.5 millimeters from the ledge. So not this inner portion here, but this ledge right here. So we're going to carefully mark that. Just kind of score a line. And there you go. That's going to be hard to see, but I've scored a line across where we're trying to get to. So what we're going to do now is take this loose hacksaw blade, and we're basically just going to, from that line, carefully cut down till we reach the depth that we're trying to hit. And there we go. Just got it right to the line. Then we're going to take our we're going to take our clippers. And we're actually just going to clip this plastic off right below our line. There you go. Then we're going to clean this up with a file. The reason I like to do it this way instead of filing the whole thing is because it's a lot faster and easier to do it this way, and you get a very clean result instead of having a bunch of, you know, potential variation in the way that you filed it. Because I've seen, like, if you're filing the whole thing, it's very easy to get kind of sideways with the file. And your lines are not as straight. All right, so that looks good. Now we're going to do the same thing for the bottom half of the shell, but we've got slightly different measurements down here. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark where these two meet. And then for the bottom shell, we do use the file for the whole thing because we're basically just filing it almost exactly to this ledge down here. So we have a pretty good reference for where we're trying to hit with the file. Let's use the hacksaw blade to make our line. Okay. That way our file doesn't get off into places it's not supposed to. That's pretty much it. That needs to be straightened out a little bit. It's not quite dead on. See, just a little bit more. So there's that. We put the two pieces together. You can see a pretty nice cutout there. Let's go ahead and put the shell back together. Or let's go ahead and test fit the motherboard to see if we need to take any more off. Oh, we have to remove this piece right here, right next to the fan. One of these fan areas here. You got to remove this piece diagonally to make room for the connector. You're going to remove this little nub from the plastic as well. So there's going to be that diagonal cut there, and that makes room for for this edge of this connector to fit there. So there's the HDMI port right there, and then we'll just dry fit the top shell onto here as well. There you go. Whoop. That's pretty much what it looks like. Sorry, the focus is not really nailing it, but I'm doing the best I can here. So that's a good HDMI port hole, so we can start reassembling the console now. All right, so we'll start putting things back together. I need to track down where I set that shield, that top shield. Well, I feel like I'm losing it. I don't know where I put that top shield. No, here it is. It was it was in the floor. It fell from where I originally put it. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and take this ribbon cable and the flex cable, feed those back through. Oh, I did this last time. You have to put the screws in for the heatsink first. No heatsink screws, no heatsink. Not good. All right. Okay, then the shield plate goes back over. And you want to make sure that these HDMI or these Wi-Fi antennas end up going through this hole instead of getting pinched. This is interesting. This shield piece that's underneath the fan, I don't see in most Wiis. So I'm assuming that that's a manufacturing change that was made for this model. I've never worked on a CPU-20 before. Almost everything I work on is CPU-40 or later. So I'm wondering if that was I have to assume that was a manufacturing change that was made partway through production, where they stopped putting in that piece. Because I've never seen that particular shield piece underneath the fan before. Okay, we got a couple pieces of shielding that fell out. Okay, now we can start putting the screws back in. So like I said last time we did this, you want to follow the Wii motherboard, or this top shield has all these markers identifying what to install when. So the screws that have the arrow next to them, you want to install those first. And then any screws that have X's next to them, you don't want to install. If you can see the X, you're not supposed to install the screw at that stage. So that's nice. That's a nice piece of design, because there are enough screws here. Now these ones with the squares, that's just indicating that this shield should be in place before you put the screws in. But you can put the screws in at this stage, even though there's not arrows next to them. But it's a pretty smart system. I'm sure that there's a legend somewhere that you can look at from Nintendo. If it was like in their manufacturing or service, the Nintendo service department, which I assume they have. But it'd be cool to see a legend from Nintendo that explains what each symbol is supposed to mean. Let's see. I think anywhere that there's a triangle, that means that interfaces with another, with like a plastic spacer or something like that. And then the places where there are squares, that's like where multiple shields interact with one another, is what it seems like to me. Oh, I missed one right here between. I almost always miss this one over here at first, because it's just wedged between these two connectors. It's easy to not see. All right. Come on. Okay, then we gotta route these Wi-Fi cables. Come on, Wi-Fi cables. These tape pieces, once they've been peeled up, never stick again. Okay, that's all good. Gonna go ahead and take this nut for the battery door and pop that in place. And we have to be very careful to make sure that one doesn't get loose. I just had a thought. What if I wonder if I could continue the assembly with the battery door in place. I don't think I've ever tried this before, but that would prevent me from losing the screw. I think I totally could continue the assembly. There's gonna be I need to take it back out later, but that could be after I've put in all the other screws except for the one that's underneath this battery door. Ah, man, I'm such a genius. I've only opened up and rebuilt, 20 of these Wiis before I thought of that. Okay, and then you want to slip that ribbon cable back into this slot right here. Right. Okay, time to install we're gonna install all the screws except for the one that goes underneath the battery door. And that should keep that battery nut in place where it's supposed to be, so that we don't have any accidents there. Okay, let's get the tri-wing screws out of the way first. front cover on. Ooh. Go. One of the plastic alignment pins there didn't align properly with the shield, so I had to push it back in. So it's flexing the entire console a little bit. Okay. It's on. Okay, now I think we're safe to remove this without the risk of losing the nut. Ah, that works so well. I'm gonna start doing that now. Oops, wrong size screwdriver. Oh, come on. Where? Find the hole. All right. So, looks like I got a package at the door, possibly. All right, I'll take a look at that here in a minute. So there you go. That's a Wii HDMI right there. Look at that. Pretty nice. All right, just got to put the screw covers and feet back on, and then we are done. We're going to do a final test run here, and then we'll be ready to go. All right, that is a done deal right there. Let's go ahead and plug this thing up and do one final test here. Look at that. Oh, I didn't save our configuration before. Let me grab my GameCube controller and turn on advanced DVI, or enhanced DVI, rather. Okay, we gotta restart the Wii. Alright, we gotta turn on enhanced DVI to get sound. And we're gonna store the settings. Let's see, is there anything else we need to do in here? No. Default settings are pretty much what you want. All right. Let me grab a game real quick so we can see that as well. Hooray! Just create a file here. All right, everything's looking and sounding good. Well, there you go. That about does it for the WiiHDMI installation. Pretty straightforward this time. Didn't have any issues, which is good. The technical issues last time mostly came from my capture setup, as well as we did have a bad flex cable. But I think, like I said at the beginning of the stream, I think I'm the one who caused that. I think the way I tried to install it last time put undue stress on the cable, and the way we installed it this time was a lot gentler on the cable. So this is what I'm going to consider to be the correct way to do this installation, and it's going to be the procedure that I follow going forward. But that's pretty much all there is to it. As I always say, if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments below, or you can hit me up on my website in a contact form on the website. I do offer this installation service to customers, so if you would like to have this done by me, then I will just go to my website. There's a link down in the description, and we can discuss the details of it over email if you send me a contact email. So that's pretty much it. Until next time, we'll see you later.